All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am Councillor Glenn Gower, and I want to welcome everyone who's attending tonight's information meeting for the development application for 6111 Hazeldean Road. So this is a commercial development. Best way I'd describe it is Hazeldean Road, just west of the Giant Tiger Plaza. It's near the Jackson Trails community. It's near the Potter's Key community. And we have a number of people joining us here tonight. First of all, I want to introduce Jordan Moffat from my team, who'll be helping out with some of our Q&A later on. Welcome, Jordan. We have Lisa Stern, who's the city planner for this file. Welcome, Lisa. And we have Jonah Bond and his team. Now, I'll give John a chance to introduce his team in just a moment, but I want to explain a little bit how tonight's going to work. We do have a presentation from the applicant, followed by a Q&A. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, or if you have a comment that you'd like to make, there's a couple ways that you can do that. If you want to share that comment live, you can put up your hand, and when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll invite you to speak and share your comment or question. If you prefer not to speak, but you'd still like to ask a question, you can use the Q&A panel that's on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and Jordan will be able to read your question on your behalf, and we'll direct that to the appropriate person on the panel. I want to say, I guess, in terms of this development, so it's an interesting one. I'll say a bit facetiously, one of the things proposed is a Starbucks. And we have a strange situation in Stittsville where we are, I believe, the last community in Ottawa without a Starbucks. So that's one of the things that jumped out at me when I first saw this application. But also there's a large car wash that's included in this, and a facility for oil changing. It is permitted within the existing zoning, but you're going to hear a little bit more about that today. We've had some feedback on this already, so I want to say thank you to residents who've shared their comments. I know one thing that we've heard a lot of is, does Hazeldean really need another car wash? So perhaps we'll hear a bit of an answer from that, from the applicants, about some of their business plan and why they think this is necessary here. But anyway, I don't want to take up too much time. I really want to give Jonah and his team a chance to introduce, and then lots of time for residents to ask questions as well. So, Jonah, without further ado, I'll pass things over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. I'm going to share my screen here, or at least attempt to, and I have a presentation in PowerPoint, which will be just a few moments, and it'll enable everyone to get a sense of what's being proposed for this site. So let me give this a try. Does everyone see that?
Yeah, we're seeing, I guess, the preview mode. So
okay, so I will have to change the preview mode because I don't see the preview mode here. So now you got the slide sorter.
Now we see the slide sorter.
That's okay. Just want to see if I can get out of the.
Yeah.
You see the second slide there, but it still has the previews on it.
You do still see the previews. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try and figure out how to get rid of that.
Always fun with Zoom and dual screens.
Oh, hide presenter view. Here we go. Does that show better?
Now
you're seeing nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a moment here. Sorry. I've got multiple screens, so I'm trying to figure out why this is not showing up. I'm going to stop the share and try one more time if that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then Jonah, if you would like me to jump in and try one more time.
Yeah, if you want to, maybe it might be easier if you just did it and I can just give you the next slide. That'd be less distracting for me.
Oh, Zoom is a little bit weird with the
yes, I have two screens. I'm having some challenges getting the right thing to show. So.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Oh, much better, much better.
Okay.
Thank you so very much. You've relieved.
Jonah has provided me with his presentation in advance, so I will be the official slide flipper. So
okay, I'll just give you the next. Well, you can go to the next and I will take it from here. That would be great.
Good.
Thanks for helping me out. So I'm still seeing the main slide. Okay, there we go. Thank you so very. Oh, still see the main slide. There we go. Perfect. So my name is Jonah Bond. I'm a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners and a registered professional planner. I work with the firm Holzman Consultants. So we are the planning consultant to the developer, and the developer's name is Grant Castle Corp, which is an entity which is non-arm's length to Halo Car Wash, which will be developing the car wash on this site. So the other people on the development team are Greg Pedersen, he's the president of Halo Car Wash, Peter McEwen, who is one of the co-founders of Halo Car Wash, and Brad Moore, who is really the real estate development manager for the applicant, and he's my point of contact at the applicant. The other members of the development team are McRoby Architects. They are not on the call this evening. James Lennox for landscape architecture. LRL Engineering with respect to civil engineering and geotechnical matters. And Freefield was hired as a specialist in environmental noise control. Next slide. So the site, as Councillor Gower mentioned, is on the north side of Hazeldean, just to the west of the Jackson Trails retail development, which has the giant tiger. We are in between Carp Road to the west and the intersection of Hazeldean and Stittsville, Maine to the east. And the site is indicated with the red pin, and it's highlighted in yellow. So the OP designation, OP stands for official plan, is arterial Main Street. And the zoning is AM9. The 9 is a subzone which refers to certain performance standards. There is an exception and also a holding provision on here. But the bottom line is that everything being proposed on this site conforms with the official plan designation and the zoning. The permitted uses on this site include the car wash, the Starbucks, the Mr. Lube, and the other retail pads. So no exceptions or changes are being sought with respect to OP or zoning. And in fact, as far as we're aware at this point, there are no minor variances. So this is really just an application for site plan control. Next slide, please. So I've taken an excerpt here from the site development plan. And what you'll see is at the top left, phase 2, which is part of the lands that are under the ownership of Grant Castle Corp. Those lands right now, the phase 2 lands, are not proposed for development. They are noted as future development, and the area of those lands is about 0.51 hectares, which is 5,100 square meters. So nothing is proposed at this time. The entirety of the site is 18,494 square meters, inclusive of phase 2. And what's being proposed is lot coverage of about 6.6%. So it's quite a low lot coverage in terms of building footprint on the actual dirt. So the improvements are noted on the site plan. At the very top right, you'll see, it may be difficult to read, new Mr. Lube. That's at the top right of the site where the cursor is being shown right now. And then if you head a little bit further towards Hazeldean or to the south, you'll see a long conveyor type car wash system. So this is a car wash system that runs on a conveyor. There's an example of this on Innis Road in the east end of Ottawa, and you drive in on a conveyor and it runs you through a car wash with very modern brushes and foam systems and soaps. And you pull out of the car wash at the end of the conveyor, and then you have the option to attend at one of the many vacuum centers, which are just to the north of the actual Halo conveyor system. So once again, the Halo is actually non-arm's length to the developer of the lands, but the other developments on the site, the Mr. Lube and the 2 other buildings, will be purely tenanted. So the developer has no interest in the Mr. Lube, I believe, nor does it have any interest in the other 2 retail blocks. So the other 2 retail blocks are on the west extremity of the site. One of them, I refer to it as Building 1. It contains 2 retail units, one of which is a Starbucks. And you'll see at the north side of that Starbucks is a little punch out, and it includes queuing for 11 cars, which is the zoning bylaw requirement for queuing. So there's a drive-through facility. And Starbucks will not be the entirety of that development. There'll be a second retail unit. I call it a CRU, a commercial retail unit. Right now, there's no user for that as far as I'm aware. It's being built on speculation. And then to the west end of the site, immediately to the west of the entrance off Hazeldean Road, there is a framed building which will be tenanted by one or possibly two tenants, subject to what the leasing program brings up. And that will just be retail commercial. It could be some form of service commercial. It could be pure retail. It could be, I suppose, a food use. But at this time, it's not known. And the parking is provided all on the north side of the building. So the official plan and the design standards that the city is promoting really drive the parking towards the back of the site and try to animate the street frontage with the building. So that's why the car wash is aligned with the street frontage, as are building 1 and building 2, to try and have as much activity along the street edge as possible to define it, as opposed to having an asphalt parking lot. So that really explains the site development plan. There is one more thing I wanted to mention. There is a pedestrian connection, which is visible on this landscape plan as well. At the very northeast corner from the residential community, you'll see that a pedestrian connection comes out at the end of the driveway to Jackson Trails. So when you're driving along Hazeldean Road and you turn north into Jackson Trails, that driveway is actually owned by the Taggart Group that owns the Jackson Trails Center. So there's going to be a joint use and maintenance agreement between the developer, Grant Castle, and Jackson Trails. And we're working out now how the pedestrian pathway can be more appropriately integrated into the site. The landscape plan is really just a reflection of the site plan with the additional feature that it has all of the trees, grasses, and other soft and hard landscaping features noted here. I would draw people's attention to the fact that at the northeast corner of the site, we're very cognizant that there's going to be an automotive related use, which is the Mr. Lube. So effort's been paid to a significant amount of greenery, trees, shrubs, and grasses. And I would point out the separation distance between the north property line and the Mr. Lube is about 35 meters. So there's a fair bit of physical separation between Mr. Lube and the residential development to the north. I think I'll leave it at that for now on the landscape plan, and we can maybe just jump to this next rendering, which gives people a good idea of what's being proposed. So if you were standing on the roof of the retirement home on the other side of Hazeldean Road and you were to peer across the street, this is what you would see when the site is fully developed. You would see a Halo car wash, which is the long building. You would see a sound control barrier, which is to mitigate noise effects from the dryer fans on exit. Behind that, you would see the queuing lanes and all the vacuum cleaner center stations for the car wash, and then a further sound attenuation barrier. At the very north of the site, you'd see the 3-bay garage for Mr. Lube. And at the far west end of the site, you'd see the 2 retail pads, one of which has, you may be able to make out the Starbucks logo on it. And at the far west end of the site, past the entrance on Hazeldean, there's right now a building that's being constructed on speculation with no defined use. The next slide will show you another perspective. These are both facing eastbound. So if you were to stand to the very western edge of the site and look eastward towards the city, on the left-hand side, you'd see the development. The drawing at the top shows both retail commercial buildings, and the drawing at the bottom simply shows a bit of a blow up with the Starbucks building and a boulevard of trees. There is a maximum setback, I believe, of 5 meters. So the city is promoting development at the street edge, which is, generally speaking, in planning terms, a positive feature to create a more animated environment. On the next slide, you'll see some elevations. I've taken the elevations from the south side. So if you were standing on the Hazeldean Road sidewalk and you faced immediately north, this is what the south elevation of the Halo car wash would look like. There's a combination of metal panels, anodized aluminum glazing, and some sound block materials with corrugated siding. So there's a variety of colors and textures there. In the image below, I've got two different renderings of the Starbucks building, as I call it. One of them is the south elevation, which is what you'd see from Hazeldean Road. And the other is the west elevation. So if you stood in front of the entrance to Starbucks facing east, you would see Starbucks on your left and a tenant sign on your right, which is the future prospective use. And the area of building one is around 321 square meters. On the next slide, you will see the building that's being erected on speculation. It is 190 square meters. The south elevation has got a combination of aluminum siding and metal panels, some of which has a wood look, some glazing. And then the north elevation is from the parking lot with a significant amount of glazing and one entrance. And the final elevation, I believe, and it may be the last slide, these are two different perspectives of the Mr. Lube. So the one at the top is the southwest perspective. So that would be really more facing towards Hazeldean. And the northeast perspective is the one that would be facing the residential development. Now, bear in mind, distance in separation between the facade of the northeast perspective and the property line is, as I mentioned, about 35 meters. And I think that may actually be the last slide.
It is.
Okay, thanks for your help, Lisa. Appreciate that. Sorry I couldn't get that right.
Okay, thanks very much, Jonah, for the presentation.
Yeah, you're quite welcome.
Yeah, so I know you have a number of people from your team who are here who can help answer questions. Just want to remind anyone who is joining us, if you have a question or a comment and you'd like to speak this evening, you can click on the raise hand button on Zoom. And if you prefer not to speak, but you still have a question, you can use the Q&A panel and we'll read out your question on your behalf to the participants here today. While I have a moment here, just wanted to say a welcome to John Curry from the Community Voice, who's attending tonight. And I saw Leslie on our participant or attendee screen. Wonder if that might be Leslie from Stittsville Central. Anyway, some familiar names there. So welcome to some of our local media covering tonight. I'll give folks a few minutes if you have a question. I have a few just off the top based on what we've seen so far from residents. One is, could we get some more details about the car wash and the noise and how that's being mitigated? You touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what the standards are or any regulations around noise from a large car wash on a site like this.
So maybe I can just lead off and then I could pass it over to one of the people on the Halo team because they've actually built these before. So as part of the development site plan application, environmental noise study was done, and it specifically dealt with issues pertaining to noise emanating from the dryer fans at the exit, which would be at the east end of the car wash. And it also dealt with noise that would be emanating from the vacuum cleaning centers. I will point out that my understanding of these sites is that the vacuum cleaners are essentially a central vacuum system, and perhaps Peter or Greg or someone or Brad could pipe in here, but they are all piped essentially right back to a central utility room in the car wash building itself, and they vent out through a stack in the roof. And perhaps I'll let Brad, Greg, or Peter, whoever's most comfortable, can address noise issues because they've dealt with this on other sites. This is not the first such Halo, and I'm just going to put myself on mute here.
Yeah, I guess I can take the lead on that, Jonah. Thanks. So in terms of our other three sites, there really isn't much of a noise issue or factor playing in with the vacuum system because it is a central vac system. And because the actual vacuum producer, i.e. the motor, is basically housed within a unit, there really isn't much noise that escapes there. So that's really been a non-factor in our other sites. Where most of the noise does come from are the dryers on the exit side of the building. And so in our other sites, we've had to deal with that with acoustic batting within the exit part of the wash, so the last 10, 20 feet. has basically just been lined with acoustic batting. And in this case here, we have, I guess, an acoustic fence extending. I'm not sure how far, but call it 10 meters or whatever.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and add one thing there, Greg. As part of this development, as Jonah mentioned, we had to conduct a noise study to ensure that any noise emanating from our operation onto other properties would be within the guidelines, and everything about the way this is designed is within those guidelines. So that work has been done.
Mute. Lisa, could I ask you, in terms of the city, the city requires these studies, but how are they reviewed, or who reviews them, and what is city planning staff or city engineers looking for?
So city staff, transportation is responsible for reviewing noise studies. They're currently reviewing this study, and they're looking to make sure that it meets provincial noise guidelines for sensitive receptors, which would be the residential uses to the rear. And again, it has to meet provincial noise requirements. And then from a planning and design perspective, we'd look that even though it's meeting noise requirements, that it's designed so that it's pleasant looking and landscaped and that type of thing.
Okay. Jordan, do we have any questions coming in from any of our viewers tonight?
Yes, we just got our first question, Glenn.
Okay.
Shall I read it?
Sure.
Okay. With queues of cars shown in this plan for the Mr. Lube car wash and parking for their areas, what kind of considerations and analysis has gone into the air quality, as often customers were idle their cars while waiting to get an oil change or a car wash?
I can just speak to that quickly, and anyone else is welcome to pipe in, and perhaps even Lisa may have probably some informed insights here. So there's no specific, from I'm aware, site development standards with respect to air quality. I believe that would be sort of in the domain of perhaps the provincial authorities, Lisa, but certainly the conditions precedent to getting this development approved would be approval of all the studies and technical matters that have been addressed, specifically speaking, the environmental noise impact assessment. But to my knowledge, there's no particular air quality assessment that has been submitted or required by the city, at least, with respect to this particular use. And maybe I'll just leave it at that and ask if Lisa has anything to add on that matter.
You're correct. So there's no requirement for air quality assessments. That typically is done for more industrial type uses or major transportation infrastructure. However, there are buffering requirements to separate the uses from the residential to the rear, as well as landscaping requirements that would help mitigate any impacts of car idling.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions, but I always want to give residents a chance to ask first. So go back to Jordan to see if we have any viewer questions coming in.
This is pretty cool. I'm monitoring a couple things here. So we have some questions from Facebook right now. Will the Mr. Lube sign be illuminated? And are there any height restrict? Sorry, no, that's the same question. Will the Mr. Lube sign be illuminated?
I can quickly pipe in. So I believe all signage will be illuminated. I am not dealing directly with Mr. Lube. Perhaps someone from the development team can speak to them. I haven't dealt with them directly in the past, but there are, I believe, sign bylaw requirements, which would, any signs going on a building would have to, I think, pass the approval of the City of Ottawa and the signs bylaw.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I imagine that the question pertains to light pollution onto neighboring properties. So Brad, were there any studies required on that note?
I believe there's a City of Ottawa dark sky requirement for photometric study, which will be done and submitted. But yeah, it will be zero cutoff, zero spillover onto the neighboring properties. So I would imagine Mr. Lube, like any other retail outlet, would turn the lights off or turn their signs off after hours. If that answers the question or the intent of the question.
I know in other commercial properties in Stittsville, there is a requirement to attune the lights, to direct the light so that it minimizes spillover to neighboring properties. So we'd have the same standard here for the lights illuminating the parking lot and the public areas. And then, yes, there would be some bylaws that apply to the signage as well, both the illumination, the size. Actually, Lisa, in terms of, I noticed on that rendering of the Mr. Lube, it goes quite high. So the signage even has to be within the zoning limits for that particular piece of property as well in terms of height, I think. Is that right?
I don't know offhand, to be honest, whether that's a permitted projection. It's something that I can look into.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have another question from the Q&A. It's about accessing the site. Where will the entrances and exits be, or will it just be beside the giant tiger?
I'll take a first crack at that question. So there was most definitely going to be a joint use and maintenance agreement as between the developer of the subject lands and the owner of Jackson Trail Center, which is, I think, the Taggart Group. So I know that's being worked out right now. That's absolutely essential to the functioning of the site because some of the traffic will come in through that lighted intersection at Hazeldean. And there is a secondary entrance to the site, which is probably going to be useful to those accessing the building 1 and building 2 retail pads, as I call them. And that is a right in, right out only on Hazeldean at the western extremity of the site in between the 2 buildings. So those are the 2 points of ingress and egress to the site. Once again, the joint use and the western extremity right in, right out.
Any additional traffic lights that would be installed? I think there's one existing in the main entrance to the plaza, but would the other entrance require signals?
No, it's not going to be signaled. It's going to be a right in, right out. So there'll presumably be a stop sign, and then people will have to proceed with caution, wait for a break in the traffic, and turn right. So there's no full movement. They cannot turn left out of the site and across the median. There's a solid raised median, I believe, in that as a boulevard with streetlights. So if you're leaving the development, you can only turn right and head further west.
Okay.
We just have one more question right now. It's about operating times for the businesses in the site.
I can perhaps let someone from the development team address that because they do run the Halo gas station, or the Halo car wash rather. The Starbucks, I'm not exactly sure what their hours are, but usually they're open early and stay open late. I'm not sure if the drive-through is going to be around the clock. Maybe the development team can address that. And the same thing for Mr. Lube. I don't think they're open late. I would imagine they close at 5 or 6 o'clock, but I will let the more informed minds speak to that.
Yeah, so Halo Car Wash is open Monday to Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sundays from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah, we're not responsible for Mr. Lube's operations, but I just did a quick Google on their hours, and it looks like it varies anywhere from 8 to 6 to 8 to 8.
Okay. I have a couple other questions that we've seen a few times so far from residents. One was about landscaping and trees. In terms of the landscaping, are any of the existing trees going to be a part of that landscaping? Or are you cutting down trees? Are you planting new trees? What's the tree plan for this site?
I don't have the actual tree conservation in front of me. There's a significant number of new trees being planted around the perimeter in particular. When I say the perimeter, certainly along the boulevard of the street, which is part of the streetscape plan, is to make it somewhat attractive. And there's a fair amount of density of trees at the northeast corner of the site. When I say the northeast corner, that's right north of the Mr. Mr. Lube site. Lisa and I did speak about this earlier in the week, and certainly the design and planning teams will have comments about landscaping, and we're certainly cognizant of the needs to provide, mitigation of noise and sound and light to the neighboring development to the north. The phase 2 development lands, which have some growth on them now, are not being touched in any way. I don't believe there's going to be any clearing of the phase 2 lands. Perhaps Brad or Peter or Greg can speak to that, but I believe those are just being untouched for now.
Yeah, the phase 2 lands at the northwest end of the property are not going to be touched until there's any kind of development that will be proceeding for that area.
Okay. Another question is about just because of the oil change facility, what kind of mitigation is in place to prevent against contamination from motor fluids and that kind of thing? What are the requirements around environmental protection?
Well, once again, I can just address it quickly, and then perhaps Peter can jump in because he has some experience as do Brad and Peter have experience with the MOECP, I believe it's called, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. They keep changing their name, but I think I got that right. So the MOECP, I believe, has authority over environmental matters, and the requirements, as I think Brad and Peter can attest to, are rather stringent. So with respect to disposal of any lubricant products, I know the standards are quite high. And I'll let perhaps either Peter or Brad speak to those particular issues. They do have some experience in the oil and gas sector.
Yeah, well, I'll just jump in with what little I know, and then Brad might be able to add something. But any lubricant products that are used on property for Mr. Lube have to be contained completely. So if they were to, for example, spill anything, they would be liable for the costs of remediating that spill. So it's not at all in their interest to ever spill a liter of oil. So they have very strict guidelines on how to dispose of that product, which is hauled away off site. But Brad, maybe you could add something more that you know about that.
Thanks, Peter. To the actual operations end of Mr. Lube, I'm not fully aware of how their process works, but yeah, I would agree with you that they're going to contain and recycle everything that they collect.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Jordan?
Yeah, we have two questions here. First one is, can you give us a sense of the proposed construction schedule when you expect to start and open up?
I can just make one comment and then I can pass it off to the guys who are going to control the actual construction itself. The site plan process is somewhat lengthy, and understandably so. There's a fair bit of review that needs to go on. So this application was submitted in the winter months. I don't recall the exact date, but I think it was a couple of months ago at least. And this process will probably take, certainly well into the summer, I imagine. I hope sooner, but it could take into the, spring and summer months before we have a final site plan agreement. So at that point in time, the developers would then be giving consideration to construction plans and construction schedules. So there's a number of months ahead before a shovel hits the ground, but I'll leave it to Peter or Brad to speak to that.
Yeah, we're going to look to break ground as soon as possible from when we receive all of our approvals from the city. We don't know when that will be exactly. So hopefully we'll be under construction within a month or so when we get those approvals. And I expect the total construction time, depending on the season of when we get our approvals, would be in the range of 8 months to do everything.
Okay, next question would be, they can see large lineups at car washes sometimes. How do you handle spillover of cars that exceed what you provided for in the queue?
Hi, I can answer that. So yeah, that's a great question. Generally speaking, when you look at a touchless car wash, they could typically process around 20 cars per hour. So, and a car every 5 or 6 minutes. So that definitely lends to longer wait times in lineups. Our car washes can wash anywhere from 140 to 170 cars per hour. So one of the reasons why we do have the 3 pay lanes is just to keep those lines moving and ensure that just we're loading as many cars as possible every hour. So although there can be some lineups, they typically move pretty quickly. The wash process itself is just under 3 minutes usually. And you can wash anywhere from 7 to 8 cars at a time in the tunnel. And so the belt really never stops. It just keeps going. So people are in and out fairly quickly.
And a question about that, the parcel in the northwest corner that's not being touched right now. Do you have any plans for it in the future? And question about the zoning as well. What is permitted in that space?
I can speak to the plans. Currently, we're contemplating selling that land, which may or may not happen. And we don't have any idea right now as to what the use of that land would be if we were to sell it. So that's an unknown at this point. And as for the zoning, I think Jonah could speak to that.
Yeah, the entirety of the site is benefits from the same zoning. If someone were to come along and do something not permitted, that would trigger a zoning bylaw amendment requirement. And furthermore, any development on that northwestern part would be subject to its own site plan control process. So we'd be doing this all over again, and there'd be another opportunity for public consultation and city input at that stage. And I think Lisa's actually shared her screen here. She's showing the range of uses that are permitted. So
Yeah, I actually brought this up, Jonas.
okay, go ahead.
AM9 is one of the most broad zonings that I think we have. These are some of the commercial uses. So this would fall under automobile. But I mean, you get down to cinema, daycare, diplomatic mission, library, nightclub, payday loan establishment. There's all sorts of permitted retail uses. And also in the AM zone, there's also residential uses. So apartments, bed and breakfast, all sorts of different types of buildings and businesses and residential types that are allowed in the AM9. Actually, that's maybe a good segue. A question I wanted to ask to Lisa. There are several car washes along Hazeldean Road. This would certainly not be the first. I believe it might be the fourth or even fifth. Does the city limit through zoning the number of car washes or any other single type of business in a particular neighborhood or along a particular stretch of road?
In a typical commercial zone, no, we wouldn't. Where there would be limits, in the bylaw, we have things for like group homes, for example, where there specifically says there's a buffering aspect. But typically, if something is a permitted use in the zone, it would be allowed on the site.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Jordan, do we have any more questions in the queue?
No, we're out of questions at the moment unless someone comes in with the buzzer beater.
Okay. Lisa, I know you wanted to make a few comments before we wrapped up today.
Perfect. Yeah, I just thought I'd take a moment to introduce myself and let everyone know where we are in the process. So I'm Lisa Stern. I'm a planner with the city, and I'm the file lead on this application. So as you are aware, because you're at this meeting, that we received an application a couple months ago for a site plan application. So as we've been talking tonight, there is zoning on the property and they are complying with the zoning. So zoning, as Councillor Gower was showing, deals with the specific uses of the properties, the setbacks that are required, buffering requirements. The site plan application that we're looking at now, we would deal with what the specific landscaping would look like, where it is, where the pedestrian connections are, the size and orientation of the buildings, the location of doors, the location of accesses, the materials of the buildings. So if you have any comments on any aspects of the plan, please feel free to email me. I can put my email in the chat in a second, as well as it's on the city's website as well. We're still in the early stages of reviewing the application. There's still a number of technical review comments still outstanding. And once we receive those, and again, I've been taking notes tonight, and I will compile all those comments, and we meet with the applicant and go over everything and request changes. There will be changes. There's always changes to a first submission, and then the applicant will go away and amend that plan. All of the submission materials will be up on the city's website, on our DevApps website as well. So you can keep track of what has been submitted through that. If you have written to me through the process, you'll be notified when there's an approval on the site as well. So I hope that helps. And if you send me a note in the next week or so, any concerns you have or anything that you'd like to ensure that's incorporated into the application, I'll ensure that I get those comments to the applicant in my review. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for that overview. Jordan, I'll just check. Do we have any more questions? If not, I will wrap things up.
We do have one more question.
We do. Good, good.
Are there any provisions for bicycle parking, any bike racks on the site to encourage active transportation?
Yes, the site plan does have bike racks. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'm certainly in front of the Starbucks building, and I believe in front of what I call Building 2, which is the far western extremity. Yes, there are bike racks, and that is a requirement, and the city does require bicycle parking as part of its performance provision. So we'll be obliged to provide for that. If it's not already on the site plan, it certainly will be provided.
Okay. Well, thank you. I wanted to just, before I wrap up, share something on my screen here. I'm just going to my website, glenngower.ca. And we have a lot of development happening in Stittsville. We have almost on a weekly basis, we have meetings like these that we host on Zoom and archive on YouTube. The best place where you can find out about future meetings is to go to this development tab on my website. And what you'll see there is a couple of things. Right now, it's loading up a map of every active development file in Stittsville. It's a kind of a busy map. Now, some of these developments are on hold. Some of them are already under construction, but you can zoom around and check in to see what's proposed or in progress in your neighborhood. And obviously, this goes a bit beyond Stittsville as well. And then just down below, we have a list of all of the current applications and upcoming meetings. I think our next one is... it's the week after next on the Tuesday evening. We have a meeting about 1837 Maple Grove. And then on the Thursday, I believe we have a meeting about a proposed development on Putney in the Fernbank area. So lots coming up in the coming weeks. The other thing is, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to my email newsletter, which you can do from here as well. And every Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, we send out an update, and it includes any new development applications that have come in, so you can keep up to date with what's going on in your community. And with that, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined this evening from the community. A thank you to Jonah, Brad, Greg, and Peter from the applicant team for your presentation. These sessions are really useful to bring these applications alive and really give residents a good chance to see what they entail. It's sometimes hard to get that from the planning documents. They can be pretty dense. So thank you for the presentation and for answering questions. Thank you to Lisa, the planner on this file. Lisa, really appreciate your input this evening. And thank you to Jordan for my team for your help with moderating our questions as they come in. We are right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everybody about the importance of staying home, of wearing a mask, of washing your hands, of keeping physical distance. We are in the worst situation right now that we have been in the past 13 months with COVID. So thank you to everyone. I know you're all doing your best. We need to keep this up for a few more weeks in order to keep our community safe. So have a good evening, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.